Hello, everybody. Welcome to another.
Oh, I guess Zoom didn't like his introduction.
Instant disconnect.
Yeah, as soon as you say welcome, it just shuts you down.
As
Yeah,
I was saying before, I accidentally did. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Python.
Thanks, Diego. We were just saying that as soon as you said the word welcome, Zoom decided to kick you out.
Yeah. All right. We have a great thing for you all today because we have a couple of very interesting subjects to discuss. I don't know if we should wait a few minutes or should we start right away?
What's up, everybody?
Hey, Dayton. But yeah, before we start, as always, please add your names to the attendees list.
God, look at how many topics Nathaniel has.
Wow.
Look at
Hey, it's just to be fair though, I think it's all the same topic.
that.
Why should we move contrib to 1.0 other languages? Da-da-da. Wow, there's a bunch of stuff to discuss. Reasons we should not. Checklist to move a package. Move open instrumentation back to core. And I guess I'll add.
Didn't we talk about this last week?
Should we talk about the release that we're trying to make?
Yeah, we usually should talk about that.
First?
Yeah, that's why I put the instrumentation back to core discussion topic in the list here. I just put it after Nathaniel's 1.0 contrib.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna take the whole meeting.
Yeah. Nice.
I don't mind talking about that first. In the PRs, I bumped Diego's PR to be the first thing because I think we should solve that, especially the docs issue.
No, definitely. In fact, we were just taking a look at your PR. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Is there Kant here today? We should talk about his OTLP one. Oh, he put it already.
Wow, so much stuff to talk about.
Bro,
Okay.
Kant, you gotta move it to the PR section, man. Move to the PR section.
Nice. All right, so since we have a lot to talk about, let's say we start right now. First topic, Nathaniel. Reasons why we should move contrib to 1.0. Go ahead, Nathaniel, all yours.
Hey. Yeah, so I definitely want to come here and find out what we need to do to get to 1.0 and maybe discuss any blockers for not going to 1.0. At least on AWS side, we're trying to like give a date and understand when we can put all the languages together at 1.0. And for many of the other languages, they're right now in discussions of either they already went to 1.0 or they're coming up with timelines and the last few things that they need to get there. So I know Python has progressed a lot. I know we have it for SDK and API. Like I mentioned here, Java, .NET, JavaScript, and Go are all hoping to be 1.0 by the end of next month. So for us, what would that mean specifically for contrib, all the instrumentation packages and everything to say we're at 1.0, there won't be any like backwards breaking changes at this point. I know last week or a few weeks ago we mentioned semantic conventions isn't stable necessarily, but on the Go side, I spoke to the maintainer and they said that they're okay with it not being that since they can either freeze the version at a specific semantic convention package, and if it does change, in the OTEPs that I linked in the migration guide, OpenTelemetry has said that they will provide an update guide or migration guide to the next schema so that there won't be breaking changes. So besides that, is there anything else that's stopping us from taking basically all the packages in contrib to 1.0?
Well, I'm not sure if we even had discussed this before. Just to answer to your question, that if there is something stopping us from doing that, right now I can't think about any reason, any technical reason not to do it, except maybe for one, and that could be that maybe we don't want to keep updating everything in Logstash, but instead updating every package individually depending on their development progress, which is something that I think we had discussed before. I think
Yeah,
Leighton mentioned it.
maybe the one thing that would be weird about that would be that you'd release the GitHub version of OpenTelemetry contrib at like 1.0, but then some packages would be at 1.1 or 1.2 when you download them. So
That's right. In fact, if we decide not to follow this approach of releasing everything every time, we should instead have just separate release processes for each package, and we may have like OpenTelemetry instrumentation for Flask in version 1.2 and for Tornado in version 1.5, and that kind of stuff.
Hey, hey, Alex, wasn't the reason why we were doing the whole not pinning the versions anymore so we could do this, so we could release different versions?
I don't think that was a reason, but we can.
I mean,
It's
that's part
definitely
of,
a bonus of doing that. Yeah.
right. Yeah, so I guess I think the releasing different versions is fine. I think the issue for moving the contributor, like taking something that's stable is pretty enormous effort. Like it took us like months, even after code completion to get API and SDK and all the other ones to a stable state. So like, are you asking like whether or not we can move it to 1.0, like some alpha version, or actually like 1.0 stable, like mark it as stable? Nathaniel.
yeah, definitely stable, 1.0 stable. I'm sure it was a lot of work for sure to get API and SDK there, but I'm just asking like what is the work that needs to, and how can we help to get that along as well?
Well, first we got to think about like think about all the workarounds and hacky stuff that we and issues that we had to face because we put API and SDK to 1.0, and then we found some like breaking stuff later on, like namely like Diego's whole like public symbol thing, this fucking suppress instrumentation thing, like so much bullshit, right? And I know that like they like ultimate OpenTelemetry has a migration guide of like backwards breaking changes and stuff, like, but then we have to apply that every single time. So we have to be very, very sure that the arguments for doing this is worth what we're going to be doing, right? So if the argument is that like, oh, okay, other companies will not take a dependency on this unless if it's stable, right? That's fair. But like, then there comes the issue of like, okay, we have contrib as a repository to exist for like instrumentations and extensions that, you know, the supportability and the maintenance hasn't really been clearly defined yet. So if we put this to 1.0 and we don't have a clear like supportability structure and or the resources to do this, then we're just like kind of digging our own grave here, right? As soon as we put it at 1.0, then like whoever's name is on it, it's like, okay, you're like in charge of like fixing everything. And since you said it's stable, if it's breaking, you have the responsibility to fix it. Like who is going to do that, right? Like we cannot possibly, you know, have this promise for every single instrumentation to do this in a timely manner. That's one problem, right? Well, that's the second problem besides the whole you know, backwards compatibility thing. So we have
Yeah,
to have a very, very compelling reason to bring
So
this to 1.0.
I think some of the stuff is what Nathaniel is suggesting in this checklist below, right? Like things like identifying code owners for packages. If you can just scroll down a little bit, Diego. So maybe the way to move this forward is to capture these
Oh, I didn't
concerns
see this.
and try and figure out how we can address them. Like I agree that ensuring that we have all of the changes we want to prevent us from having to deal with backwards incompatible changes in the future, or having to write hackarounds essentially for not breaking backwards compatibility is important. But I guess understanding what that looks like is probably the most, like, the biggest unknown for me. Is like I don't know what that finish line looks like for instrumentations. For example, there's obviously more than just instrumentations in that contrib repo, but
I mean, why can't we release contrib like individually to 1.0? Like when we're saying, can we move one contribute to 1.0? Does that mean move all instrumentations to 1.0 or everything that exists in contrib to 1.0? It's not really like that either, right? Like core, like not everything in core is 1.0. Only selective packages are 1.0. If we choose like individual packages, it's much easier to do this, right? Like to roll this out, I guess, and for stuff that we care about to be stable.
Yeah, I would say that's the goal, is to get all of Open Telemetry Python contrib to 1.0 and get it there. But I understand if it's needed according to this checklist that I mentioned, we need to identify code owners for every package, which means packages will progress differently, which means they'll go to 1.0 at different dates. And that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. Even like, we only have confidence in like 3 packages, like Flask and Django and like, I don't know, SQL or something. Then we'll move those, and the other ones we won't. So I just want to identify a path forward for that. On the other point you mentioned of, backwards compatibility and everything like that, like I feel like that's like issues are always going to come up, right? On any open source project, if somebody finds this like nuanced edge case, they're going to open an issue and say, okay, like this is broken. At that point, like if we'll fix it or someone will come along and fix it, and instrumentation Flask will go to 1.1 or something, but it won't be like backwards breaking anymore. So like if we say that that's the issue, we won't go forward, then it's almost like they'll never have a way to go to 1.0 ever.
No, that's not the issue. It's like, obviously we'll go to 1.0 eventually. It's just that like the timing of it, like we want to do it now. Where ideally, like everything is spec'd out, everything was marked as stable. So we have open telemetry stamp of approval. So, then we're comfortable with putting it 1.0.
right,
So
I guess,
AP, yeah, go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
I guess two things that come to mind. One of them is, like, today the instrumentation API is not even in the spec, for example, and like these contrib packages will eventually rely on this instrumentation API. And like, what does it mean to release a package for 1.0 if the spec is not even present? Like, what are we actually saying we're supporting there?
Which one is this instrumentation API that you mentioned? I think I saw a PR for that a while ago.
This is the
package
OTEP that Anurag is proposing. I'll have to try and look it up here, but
I think I found it. It's OTEP pull 165. I'll put it on the doc.
thank you.
Can you put that in the chat, please?
I'll put it here on the doc.
Okay, so Kant, how does this Word doc that you linked relate to the PR? Is it just like the realization of this discussion?
Can you repeat that later?
So the document that you linked, right? Like, is that related to the OTEP? Oh, it is. Never mind. Yeah, I see it.
It's kind of related. So what I was trying to, like, why I think this is like there's a lot of effort. Like people are, like there's a lot of effort going on on this area. So it might be risky to to
Right.
go
Right.
ahead with 1.0.
I see. Yeah, so there is like active discussion and development in like related to instrumentations, which is highly correlated to this stuff in contrib. So that's why I keep saying, like, is there a very compelling reason to go to 1.0?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
so
we
like
can
the
wait,
checklist,
right?
the checklist would be get this OTEP for instrumentation merged in, And then on semantic conventions, we already have them at 1.5 and a way to get back for them. Are those the only two things that are blocking us from saying these are 1.0?
Oh, okay, sure. So
No, sorry, there's something else. Is the fact that these that the third-party libraries for which the country packages instrument may also introduce breaking changes by releasing a new major version. So we also need to be prepared to know what to do if, for example, there's a new class version that's not compatible with the current instrumentation.
Right. I guess that was the second thing that I want to talk about is what does 1.0 mean for the requests package, for example? Like I would expect that this would mean we have a very clearly defined matrix of versions that we support for requests with this version. And anything that's outside of that scope, like if request launches a new version, I don't know what they're at now, but if they release a new version and it has a bunch of backwards compatibility, incompatible changes, what does it mean for our release? Like, does that mean that we now have to release a request 2.0 that supports the new version?
Yeah, and how do you keep supporting the old version? Because users will also be using the old version of the third-party library.
isn't that what we ran into with
Yeah,
Flask?
we already discussed that.
Yeah.
I see OA
Yeah,
on your console.
I opened an issue here. We had talked about this a few weeks ago when I ran into that with Flask. To your point, Diego, our instrumentations pin the version that they're doing right now. So even if Flask updates, it won't break us because we pin what version of Flask this is compatible with. But we do have a pending issue that I mentioned in the chat, and I'll put on the doc to solve this because we don't have a solution for it yet.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess for instrumentation, only major case where we have to bump the major version would be if we drop support for an older version.
Right.
But adding support for newer versions shouldn't be a problem.
Right, but I guess currently we don't make that explicit anywhere in the instrumentation, right? We just like, other than if you note to look at the setup.config file.
Yeah. So
there's
definitely
no,
part of the list. We have to.
yeah, like we should at
take a
least
bit more
make that
care.
very clear. Make it very clear, but also make it tested. Like currently our testing pipeline basically tests whatever version of like request you install, and like if it works, great. If not, then cause the problem. But I feel like we should have at least like different version tested in CI so that we can confirm that it's working.
Hey, so Nathaniel, yeah, so besides from everything that we talked about in this list, this great list that you identified, it's also like after the to do 1.0, we kind of just have to do this exact same thing we did with the API SDK and everything else. It's like, oh, make sure our docs are good, read the docs are built, CI does exactly what we expect, etc., etc. Yeah, we kind of have been not as diligent with like documentations and stuff, and examples for instrumentations in the contrib repo, but like, it's just some more work that we got to do.
There's
Totally.
another. Sorry, I just wanted to point out that there's some other scenario that we might need to consider, and I'm guessing that nobody's gonna like this, but probably if we decide to have separate release processes for everything in country, it may be more convenient to have one repo for every country package.
It doesn't have to be. I think we can automate a lot of this away. With code owners and ensuring that whoever's a code owner has the ability to approve a PR that can then be picked up by CI or something. Like it's all doable with automation.
I'm sure it's doable. It just may be more convenient to separate this into multiple repos. First reason that comes to my mind is that if we don't do this, in fact, we have that same problem right now, is that there is no meaningful history for a package. I mean, the history is just a bunch of commits that relate to a bunch of different projects. So you can't read the history and find a meaningful development history, of course, of package that you want to know about.
Well, I think the history would just be a bit harder to find, but it's still there, right? Like the commits might relate to multiple packages, but you could still always find out what the origin behind it is, right?
The changelog is also really helpful for that kind of stuff. If you label with the package name.
Although it's true that currently the changelog would be harder to read if you wanted to know like what's happening with requests. You'd have to search through the changelog as opposed to if you had a changelog for just requests. Sorry, I don't know why I'm picking on requests. I'll pick a different package next.
sklearn.
There we go.
Layton.
It's my favorite, dude.
I want to
wait
see
to-
how people download that package.
Can't wait to be a code owner for that package.
I will tag you later.
Damn.
Okay, thanks for the discussion, guys. You guys definitely thought of things that I didn't. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to prolong the discussion too much in the interest of time, but I'm curious about, like, you said the semantic conventions are essentially stable, but then you said semantic conventions for trace are experimental, which is true. I think, like, yeah, my biggest concern, besides just the API and all that stuff we said, is the actual like output telemetry that we make needs to be stable. And there is the schema thing. I'm not super familiar with it, to be completely honest, but I don't think the like compatibility between schemas, like there's supposed to be some transformation between minor versions, for instance. I don't think that it's implemented anywhere. So if we did have that, then sure, maybe we could guarantee like stability, or we like transform to whatever schema version the user is expecting. But I think that part needs to be implemented still, and I'm not sure if that's just going to be in the collector or that's something we're going to have to do in like the SDK. Do you know anything about that, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I know what you mean. The schema posted they post a YAML file every time they update, and from 1.4 to 1.5 there was nothing to update. But you're right, I don't think on the Python side we have a way to read those files and then make the translations to like have backwards compatible attributes for all that. When you mentioned that the semantic conventions is experimental, it's only experimental like on the attributes, right? So the APIs and the other points to trace are stable. It's just like, you mentioned yesterday at the JavaScript SIG when we were there, that things like OS are changing from capital Linux to all lowercase Linux and things like that. But that's, I think, what the schema update migration guide is going to be for.
Hey, is the I'm also not super familiar with the schema guide or the schema itself. Is the idea there that each instrumentation will like identify which schema it's adhering to?
Yes, as far as
Yeah.
I understand it, it
Yeah,
has.
yeah, I think that's the idea, that SDK would inject the schema version in spans or metrics,
Yeah.
and then a backend collector can dynamically
But
modify
wouldn't-
the attributes based on the migration line, or a backend
Right.
can do it.
But the instrumentation itself, in our case, would have to do to identify which schema they're supporting, right? Because the instrumentation themselves are
Yeah.
are importing the semantic conventions.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's,
like,
that's
does that also
to-do
mean-
item then.
Yeah. Does that also mean we have to remove like any hard-coded string and only use semantic convention attributes in our like official instrumentations, for instance? Because like how would we even know the schema if we're not using like the semantic convention package, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So all this being said, right? Like that's why I'm saying we're very interested in helping us get to 1.0 for contrib. So this is the list that I've identified right now. Wait for instrumentation API OTEP to get merged. Wait for this issue for major upstream packages bumps to happen. Probably make another issue to make all the attributes in contrib use the semantic conventions package. That's everything I can identify. And I think, if you have any other suggestions for what needs to be added to that list, then now would be the time to bring it up.
Should we start like an issue or something with that? Or a discussion or
Yeah,
something?
I think an issue would be good, yeah. To
Yeah, I
encapsulate
think
this.
that's a great idea.
Issue with a checklist. Let's do
Yes,
it.
please.
Okay, I'll make a checklist issue. One to be like all that, or I think what helped me last time too was the like GA breakdown board that we had on GitHub. So I mean that can probably come out as a result of the issue. But yeah, I'll make an issue first with all the things I need to get done. And then that includes when all these things are done, another checklist to what to do to release individual packages, like identify code owners and the tests for that package already and things like that. And then we can create a board on the contrib repo probably to get it to 1.0. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yep, sounds
Yep.
good. Hey, Nathaniel, can you also add what add like an excerpt somewhere of what it means to be a code owner?
Sure,
Responsibilities. Yeah.
sounds good.
What's gonna happen with packages that won't have a code owner? I imagine that being a code owner means to have at least some expertise on the library that's been instrumented. And I think,
Oh, +1.
right, it's gonna be hard to find an expert for every one of our.
I mean, we can talk about that in the issue, but personally, I think, yeah, you're right, Diego. I think it'll be really hard to pick a code owners for packages. I honestly find that to be a harder requirement to get. And I feel like we should have remove that requirement from putting things to 1.0 because we won't be able to find code owners for
mean,
everyone. And
I mean, why don't we just make the requirement that if there is no code owner, then that package can't be 1.0?
That's right. That is just, we're just telling the truth, the hard truth. I mean, this package is not 1.0, and we should also be able to mark one of these packages as not having a code owner because that's just how it is. And that's
I mean, I know we were joking about sklearn, but then does that mean that it will never be 1.0 if the guy who committed it never comes back to code own it?
Realistically, yeah.
I
think
mean,
so.
the question is, do you really want to be on the hook for maintaining a package and declaring it as stable if you have no idea if it's actually, like, if you don't have enough expertise to know that it's doing the job that we're saying it's doing, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of ultimately what we're up against. There's just a bajillion libraries that none of us have maybe worked with, and I don't think it's not necessarily like, if someone is just doing a drive-by commit and they're like, hey, I'm using this library, cool, like I want to commit this code, great, that's fine. If someone else comes along, is using sklearn and they want to use the same library, great. But there shouldn't be an expectation that like the OpenTelemetry Python SIG is going to be has enough experts about sklearn to declare we fully support this library.
Correct.
And if there's a customer out there that really wants this package to be 1.0, then great. Like, help us find someone who's going to maintain it.
Yeah.
Help find someone who's going to because otherwise the 6 or 8 people that are actively involved are going to be stretched way too thin.
Yeah, and also I don't want to promise something to our users that we just can't keep.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because then what if you're a user, you trust that 1.0 means that this thing is good, and then you try this library that you're an expert in, sklearn, and you find out that actually like nothing works the way you expected it. Well, then you're eroding the trust that the 1.0 means anything, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
And that's kind of the whole definition and purpose of having contrib, that we accept community contributions and we can host them, but we don't necessarily provide official support for them.
Yeah, we're just good hosts. Good host.
Excellent hosts.
We don't give you
Okay.
towels or anything.
We're trying to help people help themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said, Alex, is a good point. If someone wants it badly enough and like they could read the code and they say, oh yeah, this is fine. Like I believe that this will be okay with my expert knowledge of sklearn, then they can own it. And then, hopefully best case scenario, it never breaks and people can forever use it. But if
Yeah.
it does, at least we have someone to email.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, makes sense.
Excellent. That's has been an excellent discussion. Is there something else that we need to discuss about that, or can we move to the next?
Yeah,
thing?
sorry. Man, just like it's taking up a long time. But in terms of timelines, like Nathaniel, I know that you have like a lot of stuff, like a lot of issues and PRs out already. Like, is this something that you want us to focus on or like prioritize rather than the other stuff, or?
Um, I I I mean I think end of August would be nice to get these done. Like this is probably what I'm going to spend most of the time, my time now is getting these issues fixed and ready so that you guys can look at it. I just will mention them as I finish them, and if we can finish by August, that's great. If not, that's
Sure.
fine too. I'll just
Sure.
point it out and mention that it's part of this, and hopefully that will give you guys a reason to prioritize reviewing that PR, for example.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. So
Nice. Was that the first 3 topics down?
Yeah,
all
Got
right,
them.
that's done.
nice.
The next one will be uncontroversial, I'm sure.
All right, yeah. Now for this topic that nobody wants to talk about. Okay.
No, it'll be
should
easy.
we, yeah, should we move open to instrumentation back to core? Just to give some context, the last release that we made, the latest release that we made, had the open telemetry instrumentation in core. We have moved it since then to contrib, and now we are considering moving it back to core because, to be honest, because the release process for this release has been affected by a bunch of issues related to this. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the symptom that we're seeing is there is a dependency on installing instrumentation in the core repo because of the suppressing API key, suppress key or whatever. And I think that's really just a symptom. Like that key shouldn't be probably in the instrumentation package. But then this created a bigger discussion around, well, what should and shouldn't be in the core repo. And I think there's no real compelling argument to keep the instrumentation package into the contrib repo, because as maintainers and as approvers of OpenTelemetry Python, we're obviously very concerned if people are making changes to the instrumentation package, because it impacts everybody who's using it, which is all the instrumentations. So I think we should just move it back. Again, ultimately, the real solution to this weird dependency that we're having with the builds is to not have that suppressing key in there and have it somewhere in the API. But until we're confident that there's a mechanism that we can call supported for that, we're probably not going to move it. So this solves our current build issues, but it also, like logically, there's no reason why it should be in contrib versus core. So I don't know if anybody has a strong argument one way or the other.
I have a strong argument. No, I have a weak argument. No, yes, I agree with Alex. The reason why I think implementation should be in contrib in core repo is because it defines an API that others follow, and that API is defined by ourselves. We define that API, and pretty much everything else that is in the contrib repo can be implemented by people outside of this core, outside of this. They will be just implementing APIs that we define. So So yeah,
Yeah, I think-
I agree with that.
I think the original reason to move it out was that there wasn't any definition for the actual instrumentation in the spec. But at the same time, that's currently in progress. I think the first OTAP, talks about instrumentation and auto instrumentation as part of the core of OpenTelemetry. So I think we should just move it there.
Oh, I think also just a correction. I think we've already released 2 releases with the instrumentation being in core. I mean, in
Yeah,
control.
that's right. They've just been janky.
Okay, sorry, my mistake.
To me, the main definition of whether it should be in core or contrib is whether the maintainers for this or code owners for this package are maintainers of code or contrib. So if they are maintainers of code, I don't see any issues with this being living in core. I guess the only reason for this to possibly live in contrib is if it's being maintained by someone who is not like part of OpenTelemetry, Python, the approvers or maintainers group.
Yeah, I think instrumentation is important enough now that especially with the auto instrumentation stuff and the distro stuff, that we would need to maintain it. All right, sounds good, guys. Easy decision. Anybody have an objection to this?
Oh, quick question. Where does the auto instrumentation live? Is that in core?
That's
No, it's in contrib in OpenTelemetry
contrib
instrumentation.
currently, yeah.
So like with OA's argument that if that's going to be maintained by the OpenTelemetry authors, shouldn't that be in the core repo too?
It's
Yes.
gonna be when we move this back.
We're moving it together, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
Okay,
to be clear, my argument was like the reverse of it. If a package has a maintainer who is not a hotel Python maintainer approver, then it has to live in country. Otherwise, it
Oh, I
can
see.
or country.
Well, what that was a lot less controversial than I expected. That's great.
Yeah, man, just get out of here.
All
I'm just trying
right,
to ask,
so
would that be in the 0.24 release, like the one we're trying to get right now, or will that be later?
Yeah,
we're
trying to move
planning
it first.
move this
Okay.
first because that will solve a bunch of issues that we're having with this release. And talking about releases, here there's a PR of mine.
I added it. It's your
Oh, you
PR.
did?
Bruh.
All right, so
I've seen like 5 PRs like this in the past like 2 days.
I
So,
added
yeah.
one in before I realized he added it too.
Yes, I've been making a bunch of PRs, and that's just me trying to learn the release process. So sorry about that. Okay, yes, this is the PR that we hope turns into a new release. We had a few technical issues with the release script. Those are solved right now. And now we are having a more important issue that is being caused by the OpenTelemetry instrumentation package being a country. We have already decided to move it back, and that should fix this issue. Now, I don't want to take credit away from Nathaniel, who kindly submitted a PR to fix permanently the temporary fix that I tried to add to solve the issue caused by OpenTelemetry instrumentation being in the country repo and not in the core one. So I think that when we move this back, none of these fixes, my temporary fix or the better fix that Nathaniel proposed, will be necessary. Still, thank you very much, Nathaniel, for your effort in providing one better fix than mine.
No problem. It made me think about it because I remember I did this originally last year, and I don't really like how it is set up right now. It made me rethink why we needed it in the first place. And I think regardless, this will still be helpful because it's kind of confusing, I think, right now to say docs requirements because our tox build downloads these docs requirements. But the only reason we added these links was because the read the docs build was breaking because it didn't have these ones. Because read the docs downloads from this file, and so therefore downloads from the latest repo. But tox shouldn't be downloading from this. It should be downloading from whatever people are committing on their branches on the local directory because tox has access to it, but read the docs doesn't have access to it. So after we move the instrumentation package to core, I'll look out for this PR to see if we can fix that with the same fix that I have right now all together so that we don't have this ugly git VCS thing in the file anymore. But yeah, we can follow up with that later.
Yeah, there is only one point that I think Alex mentioned before, was that for the documentation, we kind of need to pull code directly from the main branch, because if not, we can't pick documentation changes. Is that right, Alex?
It's in the, is that in Nathaniel's PR for the docs?
Yeah, it's in the PR, I think.
I think that's in
That's,
the later discussion,
what
right? We can talk about that
Aaron
after.
commented on.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. We need to pass with this topic. Okay. Yes. So I think well, this issue, I guess, can be solved by fixing this one, and we can move to this other one from Nathaniel. Go ahead, Nathaniel, please.
Yeah, so this will just solve the issue, or it'll just make it cleaner after we've moved the instrumentation one. Aaron made a good point that we can't download it from PyPy because the read the docs also needs the latest changes. So I think the only thing that we need to fix is this read the docs.yaml file will also install using that ugly git URL. If you scroll down a little bit, it says using pip download from here, from the repository, and that should fix this so that tox uses the files in its own repository and read the docs still uses the latest by pulling from the repo. Although now that I look at it, I think it might need, if it's doing latest, it might need a hash to be able to do it, because otherwise this might just pull the latest tag. But either way, we can close this PR and solve that later.
That will pull from the main branch, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Okay, if it pulls from the main branch, then that solves the issue, right? So that'd be nice.
All right. So Nathaniel, are you planning on closing this PR?
Yeah, I will close this, and then once you release the next up release thing, I'll make another PR on that one from your repo.
All right. Perfect. For my repo?
Yeah, because it'll be your pull request to the update, right?
Okay. When I make a new release PR. Okay, I understand.
Or you
This
could
is
just
really weird.
or you could just
But then
read how I did it here and add it to your PR.
I see ocelotl. It's just like, why?
Oh yeah.
What?
Hey, Aaron.
Nathaniel, what's the difference between having that in the constraint file versus having it in that YAML file? I'm not sure I understand.
I think it's just a bit cleaner. I think it defines the intentions better because right now in the talks.ini file here, you see we already had, like in the red, it's installing the talks.ini OpenTelemetry instrumentation, right? Which is in the repo. But then in the docs requirement file, it was also downloading instrumentation one. So they were both trying to install it.
Okay, which environment? Can you scroll up a little bit over, Diego? Which talks environment is this for?
This is for docs.
For docs.
You scroll up.
Okay, I don't think I understand still, but that's fine. We can discuss it offline.
Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to call out though is if we do decide to do this, like we wouldn't be aware when the builds for docs break. So like if talks is breaking or not breaking, for example, but then the actual read the docs are breaking, we would know it. So that would definitely be a problem.
Yeah, I have a proposal for that actually. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's a read the docs check that you can set up with your repository. So we'll actually run the doc build on read the docs, and then it will send like a check to your PR. I don't know if we have the ability to set that up, but that might be better, and we can just remove the docs one altogether.
Yeah, I think
That would
currently
be
Alex and
awesome.
I have to like run it manually and see if it works or not.
No, we
Yeah.
don't. We don't have to run it manually, but if it
We don't
fails
run it
for
manually.
whatever reason, we don't see it.
Yeah. We find out like 2 weeks later.
That
Also,
sounds a good
question.
idea.
Also, question. Does anybody know what like the docs requirements text purpose is? Like, what is that used for?
Yeah, it's used for read the docs specifically. So you see it's the first line in this read the docs.yaml, but you can't run like arbitrary code for read the docs. You can only specify whatever's in this YAML. You can't, I mean, you could probably hack around to do it, but that's the reason it's in a separate file like that.
Okay, so like, is that only because we put the requires in the read the docs.yaml? Like conceptually, if we didn't have read the docs, right? Like, what's the docs requirement used for? Like my understanding before was that like users can see the docs requirement.txt and then pip install that, and then I should be able to run all the examples or something. Like that was my understanding before. That's nothing to do with
Yeah, no,
that,
it's,
right?
no, it doesn't.
Okay. So in that case, then in terms of like the examples and stuff, like it's up to the user's discretion to set up everything themselves, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, so I guess we don't have that outlined yet.
I guess they
Okay.
do the each disk develop, which takes like 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Cool. Got it.
All right. So can we move to the next topic? In that case, we have Centennial again. Add AWS Resource Detectors.
Also 10-minute reminder.
Yes, sorry, I'll be quick about this. This is something I've been working on for a while. It's something that we need to have parity between all the languages. We already do this on JavaScript and Java. I just added in our same SDK extension one a bunch of resource detectors for users who are running OpenTelemetry Python on AWS services. I added unit tests as much as you can test without being on the actual environment. And this is my colleague who already approved it, and another one hopefully will have a chance to review it. If you guys had a chance to look at this as soon as the tests are passing, because it's breaking on the docs and the semantic conventions that it needs from above. But I would appreciate any reviews on this. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. That's really all.
I can't take a look at it because it says drafts. Physically can't look at it.
Yeah, it looks ugly. Well, that's the goal. I don't want you to look at it because the tests are failing.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste your time, Leighton. You can go
Thanks,
study
man.
sklearn
Thanks.
instead.
Yeah, you're right.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
So next topic, we have Centennial with default configurators. Do more for this. Oh, yeah, this is next on topic that we discussed. Nathaniel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so there's been quite a few long comments that even I haven't read through in the last few days on these PRs. But I did want to highlight that the two PRs should be independent of each other. Like, I think the biggest thing that we're worried about is that distros are conflicting, and can you have more than one distro? What does it mean to install a distro? But this PR should be mostly independent of those decisions. This is just to move out some of the items that are in OpenTelemetry distro up into SDK in private classes, mind you, as a way for other distros to make use of these really helpful methods. So it doesn't say anything about whether you can install multiple distros or you can only have one. It's just to make it available for other people to make distros, because otherwise we're just going to be copying a lot of code. It's a pretty small PR. It just kind of moves the files over and makes it available for other people to download. So I think we should be able to review and approve this one independently of anything else that we're worried about.
Yeah, I think these two issues are actually very related. The location of the distro code and the decision if we want to allow for, allow for more more than one distro to be installed. Let me explain. So I am proposing something different, and what I'm proposing is that we allow the user to have multiple distros installed, and if that there is more than one distro being installed, then the user must use and define an environment variable to decide which distro should be used. And the reason why I think this will affect this other discussion about the common code is that if we follow this approach, I believe that we will not be moving any code into the SDK, but instead we'll just have the distro code exist in the OpenTelemetry distro package, probably as part of an ABC that's defined and makes an interface that others should implement. And the way that code will be reused and shared between distros will be just the usual inherit from a parent class. So that's why I think these two issues are actually related if we follow this other approach. Of course, the decision of following this other approach is its own topic of discussion, right?
I see. You're kind of on the other spectrum then, because on one side we have people who say we should only have one distro, but if we go with your solution and we don't move out these useful functions, then the only way you can have OpenTelemetry distro AWS is if you have that one and you have the OpenTelemetry distro installed. At that point, you must have multiple distros installed. Am I correct to understand
Yes,
you?
but with one exception is some detail I didn't mention. I believe that we should provide a default distro that will be like we have in everywhere else, like we have like a default data provider or default base or something like that. And that default distro does not count. I mean, only when you have three distros, the default one, distro A, and distro B, is when the user must set an environment variable. So the common code can be in this default or abstract or base distro instead of. Okay.
I think it's a bit strange, to be fair, that we would say that the first one doesn't count, because in the end of the day, right, it is a distro. It's what allows you to use auto instrumentation and other things. So I think it definitely counts. If you add a second one, like a distro A, and it's just expanding on the first one, on the default one that you mentioned, it's still like setting environment variable, still doing something different from the other distro. If it doesn't count, it almost sounds to me like it should be like utility functions, which is what this PR is trying to make it be more like.
question.
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
What? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
wait, go.
Yeah.
No, don't. Oh, wait, go ahead.
So I was saying that there are two problems here, and in my opinion, we're like mixing them up. So one issue is whether users should be able to install multiple distros, and then without uninstalling one, just specify which one they want to use. I cannot think of a use case where a user would want to do that. I tried very hard, but couldn't come up with a use case for this. So the other problem is distro authors want to reuse other distros as libraries. But if they do, then we are essentially installing multiple plugins, and then we have this conflict about which plugin is being used. So what Nathaniel's approach looks quite good to me. I think it's in practice the simplest one. But if we really wanted to be able to use other distros as libraries, I think a very simple solution would be for distros to have some additional metadata. And in that metadata, we would have like a weight or a priority, which would be just a number. So the default distro would ship with 0. And we have Lightstep, Splunk, and AWS distros would ship with 10. And then the OpenTelemetry instrument command just sorts by this weight and just picks the highest one. And if someone wants to use AWS distro as a base and then create another distro. All they have to do to ensure that users, when they install their distro, that's the one that'll be used. They just need to bump the priority from like 1+, or the number should be higher than the library they're using, right? So if I use AWS distro as base and it has priority 10, all I have to do is to set my priority to 20 in metadata, and I'm guaranteed when users install my distro, even though it will pull in 2 or 3 other distros, mine will be used 100%. So only issue here is, what if users manually install multiple distros that have the same priority? In that case, we just raise an exception because we don't support for end users to install multiple distros. Does that make sense? I think heuristically, that's very simple to implement and reason about. That doesn't involve special cases.
I think if I was a user, it would be hard to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, but I mean, in this case, if you were a user, go ahead.
We only have like 2 minutes, and I don't think this is going to be enough time for us to completely discuss this issue. Right now, I think the arguments for and against all these ideas that we have are distributed in several PRs and several issues. So I suggest this. I will create a new discussion, and I will try to bring in that discussion all the arguments that have been proposed, so that we can put all the discussion in only one place, and then hopefully make a decision. How about that?
Yeah, can you link
One thing I want to point out.
Daniel's discussion PR? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one thing I want to point out is that we already voted on this, right? We made an issue several weeks ago and people commented and already voted for one or the other. That's why I went ahead and made the PR and got approvals for it and put it. So it seems kind of redundant to me to make a new issue with all the points again.
Yes, sorry about that. I think I'm the one.
Diego was the only one that didn't
yeah.
Vote. I mean, you're the only one that's saying on for the other side, right?
Yeah, and I apologize because I actually forgot to vote, and then I saw that some people had voted already. I introduced my comments, and then a new discussion came out of it. So I'm sorry if this feels redundant to you, Nathaniel. It surely is. It surely is redundant. But right now, our situation is that these ideas have been spreading into a lot of different places. So I'll do an effort to bring them back in, because I think
okay. At the very least, yeah, there's only this PR I'm saying should be separate from the overall distro discussion. So if you're looking for them, you should find just one issue and then 2 PRs. At the very least, this first PR should be able to go independently because it works with your solution too. But yeah, if you want to open a new one, I'll be happy to add my comments on it too, and we can come up with a discussion there next week.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you. We are over time, so I don't know if people want to remain because we still have several topics to discuss. Or
hey, Sir Kant, yeah, sorry for not getting to your pull request. We could add it to the top for next week.
All right. So we'll be discussing this next week. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your ideas. See you then.
Nice to see you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys later.
Bye.